Tropes are a huge part of the fantasy genre, and the dictionary definition of a trope is a significant or recurrent theme, a motif. Just because a book has lots of tropes doesn't mean it's inherently good or bad. It's really dependent on how they handle the tropes. That being said, a trope can turn into a cliche if it's used in a very generic in a very generic way, or if just lots of releases have the same trope, people can get really burnt out on them. So let's tier rank some of the most notable tropes in fantasy and decide which ones are normally good and normally bad. Again, there's usually exceptions. And this video is sponsored by Campfire, but more of that later in the video. The ranking is Gimme More Yesterday, top tier, obviously the best of the best, the ones that I love pretty much every single time they're used. Second is I Love This. It's maybe not amazing, but overall I still love it. Then we have This Is Good, then and then Please Don't Do This. Just the tropes that should just not be utilized. And we are starting with an iconic one, the mentor figure. Now the mentor can work really well. There's a reason that it is included in the hero's journey narrative structure. It is a great way for the character to learn more about things that they wouldn't naturally know, and in turn that then teaches the reader or audience the same things. So Gandalf teaching Frodo and Sam about the world. And then pretty much every single time the mentor dies. And then that skyrockets the main character into having to deal with things themselves. Overall, I do think it's a great trope. You can immediately tell when you get into a book who the mentor character is. And you're like, well, they're probably going to die in, 30% into the story. So it can get a bit formulaic. But again, there are outliers. People like Moraine is definitely an outlier. I would even say Gandalf is an outlier because he kind of dies, but is an integral part to the story. So not every single case is going to be generic and formulaic. So I'm going to put in I Love This. You can't be a good mentor. Some of the best characters are mentors. Okay, next up we have the medieval setting. I was kind of on the fence if this is actually a trope or not, because it is a setting. But at the same time, it's so common that it's kind of become a trope in the fantasy genre. It's a very comfortable trope, and I think a lot of people enjoy it because it is very familiar and immediately puts people at ease. It's something almost nostalgic, even if it comes from a new story. And I mean, who doesn't love a warm inn or cobbled streets? I do think there will always be a place for medieval settings in fantasy. There's no way it's going anywhere anytime soon. But I don't really want every single book to have this setting. I think I would get burnt out really quickly. So while I don't want less medieval settings in books, I want more not medieval settings coming from books, if that makes sense. There will always be a place for it, and I love to go back to it for that warm, comfortable, classic fantasy feeling. But I love reading about new types of cities, new types of settings that we've never seen before. That's part of the magic of fantasy for me, is exploring these new places and cultures. Give me more weird cities. That's one of the reasons why some of my favorite books are A Master of Djinn, which is 1912 steampunk fantasy Cairo. Bizarre, love it. Flames of Mira, a society that lives underground in tunnels, clinging close to lava because the surface of the planet is uninhabitable. Pretty much the entire catalogue of Sanderson's work. So because of that, I'm going to give it I like it, but something a wee bit different is always fun. Next up we have a Campfire. Campfire? Once upon a time, a reading platform was created, and stories came to life. Readers reported fearsome dragons in flight, monsters emerging from the depths, and mysterious spirits entering our world. Campfire is where you can enjoy your favorite genre fiction through an interactive reading experience right in your web browser. Discover new reads and unlock exclusive bonus content like short stories, world lore, and character profiles as you progress through each book. Save stories to your bookshelf with custom collections, and join a community where you'll support authors with higher royalties than anywhere else. Create your free account and choose genres you would like to read, then cozy up with a new book. All paid stories on Campfire have the first few chapters available for free, so readers can decide if they are interested or not. So pick up a book today, pick up a couple, read them at the same time. No, don't do that, that would be silly. Campfire is where stories come to life. Click the link in the description to learn more and find your next read on Campfire. Thank you very much, Campfire, for sponsoring this video. I can confirm that I am actually on fire right now. That's how much I love Campfire. However, I do not recommend this. Do not light yourself on fire. Just read a book, like normal people. Ah, yes. The Batman trope. When I was finding pictures for these tropes, I didn't know what to do. This one is kind of the types of fantasy stories that always kill off the parents at the start. Is very typical in fantasy because a lot of the time parents will be like, why are you doing this? This is a terrible idea. You should not go running away with this stranger that came into our town and go on this grand adventure. That doesn't make any sense. So a way to kind of avoid that is just kill off the parents. It's also a great motivator. Maybe the character becomes a revenge story to kill whoever killed his parents. Don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. It is a great way to kind of free these younger characters from more societal norms. However, it would be a lot more interesting to read a story about societies that maybe don't have the same familial bond between children and their parents. Could be really interesting, or even including the parents in the story in some way, or the main character being a parent. I think is an underutilized aspect of human nature that we've not really seen much of in fantasy. Orca's a great example in the Bloodsworn saga. She is a mother and she's trying to find her son, and her passion and her love to find her son is just a fantastic motivator that makes a great arc for her character. So I don't think it's bad to Batman your characters, but the Batman's a verb now. I do think it's still an eh. Next up we have Prophecy. Now Prophecy is a really interesting one because when I first got into reading, I was reading Percy Jackson, and I absolutely adored the start of the books being Percy Jackson getting given this prophecy, and then younger me trying to decode the prophecy before the events of the book. Like, what could that mean? I wonder what that would be referring to. It just kind of adds this fun foreshadowing riddle right at the start of the book. So I do think that this is a really fun trope. I don't see it that often in adult fantasy anymore. It's a really fun way to set up a story promise. And how that promise is resolved is half of the fun of prophecies. Like, it doesn't need to be resolved how it looks. Flipping on his head and adding these more twisty turnies in the narrative because of the prophecy, really interesting. I think it's a lot of fun. So I'm definitely going to put that up in... I'm going to put it in the top of this is good, but I might end up moving that into I love this, possibly. Next on up we have Animal Companions. Immediate gimme more yesterday. Who doesn't love an animal companion? And there's no reason behind it. I just like animals. They're awesome. So it doesn't matter, you know, you don't need to tie them with the plot. Just include them. Just occasionally say, and then he duck down and pet his dog and then continued on with his quest. That's fine with me. As long as there's a cute animal there, I am in. I am definitely in. That being said, there's a fine line. If you kill the animal companion, I'm gonna burn the book. I'm gonna burn the book, kill the author. It's the reasonable response. It's the only reasonable response to that type of twist. I don't like it. No, but seriously, there is just something really wholesome about the relationship between an animal companion and the main character or a side character. I think it's some of the same reason that we really like found family and platonic relationships between characters, because it is just the complete loyalty and friendship between two beings. It's just so sweet to see.
You were the chosen one!
The chosen one trope is probably the most common one you will find in fantasy. Actually, maybe medieval setting, probably more so, but this may be second then. I think this is where a lot of us got into fantasy. This idea that someone unsuspecting and normal can be picked out of the crowd and brought into this grand adventure as the chosen one. And a lot of the time it is just because, well, Destiny said that it was going to be them, so they're the ones that are now the chosen one. So I can see the argument that, you know, it's just a way to cram in some random person into this big epic scale story, but I think just as a trope, it just works because everybody wants this more normal person to be the one that's on this grand quest. It means they'll be learning at the same time as the reader or the viewer about this magical world and all the mysteries that come with the main tale. And it leans into this idea that's really common in fantasy that anybody could make a difference if they are persistent enough, which is a good theme. So I'm going to put this in I love this. I'm going to move these side by side because next we have the fake out death. On the complete other end of the spectrum, I hate this. really don't like this. If an author makes it look like they have killed a character for you to then grieve and go through this, oh I really like them, and have a big emotional response to then completely go back in that, the emotional response then feels cheap. And not only that, the author loses trust. If someone else dies, they'll just be like, well, are they dead? Or will they come back in a couple chapters or the next book? Then takes away some of the potency of this tension that they can build with fighting scenes. It just feels cheap. Now, there is a type of fake out death that I think is fine, and that is when it looks like a character's dead in battle, but then it turns out they're alive within like the same page or perhaps the next page. Because I think that's realistic. In battle, you will see your friends go down, be stabbed, be bleeding out, be on the brink of death, but then they might be healed afterwards, which is fine. I think the way that that's fine and the other one isn't fine is the level of time you have before you tell the reader that character's not dead. If you leave it going for too long, then I'm just going to trust you that the character's dead, and then I'm going to feel betrayed when they're not dead. Not to be mixed up with resurrection. Now that is when a character dies, properly dies, and then is brought back to life instead of thinking they're dead when they're not dead. Now this again is dependent on execution. It sometimes doesn't work because of the same reasons of the fake out death. It makes you feel cheap, it makes you feel like if characters die, they'll just be able to come back. However, I've seen cases where the author kills a character, resurrects them, and they're different people. The act of death has then changed the character, in which case it is just part of their arc. And the character that died is dead. This is a brand new version of this character. And I think that adds really some interest in the character and how have they changed? How's death changed them? And that I actually quite like. I think that could be really fun in a book. It is all in the execution. I don't know if I should put this in the top of or the bottom of this is good. Because it can be good, it can be great, but it's really difficult to do well. I'm going to put it top of because it's quite rare I've seen it done well, so I'm going to put it top of Next we have magical weapons. Now this is immediately top of I love this. Magical weapons can be so much fun. They add so many different dynamics to battle sequences. You can really make something a lot more interesting than just two armies clashing. That being said, it doesn't work every single time. I've seen authors use it as a deus ex machina. They're in the final battle of the book, they're fighting, and then just suddenly they're just like, oh, we'll just use the magical sword and kill him. Much like magic systems, magical items are really interesting because of their limitations or their cost. Just like anything in fantasy, when things are magical and overpowered and really strong, it's finding ways to then be able to challenge that, or to temper what they can do. However, overall, I have way more fun than I don't with magical items. It's just fun. Who doesn't want to have a flaming sword or something really cool? Next up, we have Murphy looking really excited about found family recommendations. When I was looking for pictures for this, I googled found family, and the thumbnail to her video was one of the pictures that came up on the Google search. I was like, Happy Murphy talking about found family books? Perfect, that's what I'm gonna use. Immediate give me more. I love found family. Found family's such a wholesome and meaningful dynamic, especially when it's different people from different walks of life just being forced together because of a certain situation, and then growing a bond and seeing this dynamic change over time and how they grow closer and become more loyal. It's the same reason I love Animal Companions. It's just a lot of fun to see grow, and it's just wholesome and nice. We all like a little found family trope. Next up, we have the reluctant hero. Now this is the hero that doesn't really want to go on an adventure. They don't really want to be doing any of this, but they just kind of get dragged along anyway. This is like Bilbo in the Shire saying, no, Gandalf, I don't want to go do that. I just want to sit here, smoke pipeweed, and drink ale. I'm going to put that in this is good. I don't really feel strongly either way about this trope. It's completely dependent on the character. It can be a lot of fun because it can be a really interesting character arc if this more quiet, introverted, not wanting to go out and adventure type character then becomes this big grand adventure. That is just an interesting arc. But overall, I'm not really leaning more towards that I love it or that I hate it. It's just kind of, just there, cool. Next up, we have the Dark Lord. This is your evil lord that just wants to take over the world, throw the world into darkness. Often he's locked away and he's coming back from the darkness. It's very classic fantasy. The one thing I really love about the Dark Lord is the atmosphere that this type of character then can create. This idea that there is this great evil Dark Lord that's returning, and he has this past where maybe he just failed in the past, but this time he's going to do it. Nobody wants to say his name. there is a great atmosphere that's built from a Dark Lord character. However, from a narrative standpoint, it can get a little dull just having this antagonist being someone who's they just want to destroy the world and be evil because they're evil. There are a lot of books that start off this idea that it's just this Dark Lord who wants to take over the world and be evil, but then as we go on, we learn more about this antagonist and why they're doing what they're doing, and just adding more depth to them as a character and giving them motivation to why they are doing what they are doing. So I'm going to put it at the top of this is good. Actually no, Prophecy probably works more often than Dark Lords, maybe above Reluctant Hero. In fact, I'm putting Prophecy up here. Maybe more than the Chosen One, but less than Mentor? Yeah, I think I like that. Let's do that. Next up we have Love Triangles. I don't know if I should put this in Please Don't Do This or I just don't care. Often they're really boring because you can see that it's just going to be one or the other, and usually you can tell which one's going to work. Of course there are exceptions. I'm going to put in Please Don't Do This. It's just boring. Next up we have the greatest of all time, the OP characters. So of course I had to choose Shaggy as the icon. This is the impossible to kill character. This is when the main character just becomes completely overpowered, that you wonder how could there be any threat to him as a character or her as a character now. Now this might be a controversial opinion, but I quite like overpowered characters as long as they're handled well. My favourite type of overpowered character is more of an underdog story, and then you can see their character arc becoming the most powerful character ever. I'm very much a character reader, so someone who can go from nothing to everything is just a really interesting character arc to see if it's done well. And there is just something really satisfying of this character being really invincible, and then suddenly there's someone stronger that he has to face. Just when you think he's defeated all the biggest bad guys, there's a bigger bad guys. It can feel cheap if it's just, oh, we're just going to throw in this new enemy and he's somehow more powerful. There needs to be good reasoning behind it. In a very similar vein, we have plot armor. No one really likes the idea of plot armor, however there has to be some level of they're the main character. The chances that they're going to die is very slim. It's how you keep this level of threat and danger potent and keep the reader sitting on the edge of their seat. This is often done by killing other characters. I think that is a really good way of showing that, characters will die, just probably not the main one. However, if you do kill your main character off in your book, that would be amazing, and I would definitely love to read that too. And last but not least, we have a quest. Now, quest is definitely Gimme More Yesterday. Who doesn't love a good quest fantasy? Why are you not working? Murphy really likes the campfire. Murphy, away from the fire. Murphy? Oh boy. The reason I think quests work so well is because there's constantly changing landscapes, which makes it just visually interesting and appealing. You get to do a lot of what fantasy brings to the table as a genre. You get to explore more of the world, more of these cultures. And quests do a really good job of setting up a certain condition. So we need to meet this condition, that's the point of the book. And that means every time that they move to a different city, or they get closer to this final location, or they get further away from maybe someone that's chasing them, you feel that progression. It's a fantastic way to build progression into the narrative in a very natural way. And it's just always a good time. Who doesn't love a good quest fantasy? Who doesn't? If you do not like it, you're wrong. And that'll do it for today. That is some of the best and worst fantasy tropes. Please let me know in the comments below if you agree with me, or if you think some of them should be higher or lower on the list. And a big thank you to Campfire for sponsoring this video. I absolutely love what they're doing. I mean, having better rates for indie authors is huge. Having this extra content for the readers is just such a great idea, and I can't believe no one else has done this yet. So please go check out what they're doing. It is really cool stuff. But thank you very much for watching. I wrote a book. Outro. Whoop-a-doo.